G'day, my name's Anneke, and today we're going to talk about permaculture and a couple of the principles of permaculture and how they're applied in a polyculture orchard. But why are we standing in a forest? Well, permaculture's principles are based on natural ecosystems. So, as you can see, in a forest, there's lots of principles we can learn from. First of all, nature produces no waste. So if you have a look at the leaf litter here, this is probably what we'd immediately think of as waste. However, this is all reused. The microorganisms, bugs, worms, fungi, bacteria break this down, put it back into the soil, which is then fed back to the trees and gives the trees energy to produce the seeds for the birds and the bees to eat and reproduce the trees again. So it's a closed loop, closed cycle. Secondly, there's always diversity. In a healthy natural ecosystem, there's always diversity. This is because nature has evolved over eons and eons of years to fill every niche within the ecosystem to make sure that all the energy within the ecosystem is used. So you'll see plants on the understory, plants on the top story, and everything in between. You'll also see a large amount of diversity of birds and bees and everything else, but we can't catch them on camera. And these all play a role to keep the ecosystem healthy. Diversity makes an ecosystem robust, flexible, and resilient to pests and diseases. The third principle that we're going to look at today is obtaining a yield. Everything in nature needs to obtain a yield, whether it's a tree, a plant, a bird, a bee, a worm, a fungi, or a bacteria. They all need energy to do the job that they do. We also need energy, so we also need to make sure that our gardens are designed in a way to obtain a substantial yield so that we're happy to keep working in the garden. So let's have a look at these principles in practice in the garden up the hill here. Come on. So as you can see, this is a polyculture orchard. It's got a lot of similarities with the natural ecosystem. So you can see the upper story, the Camarillo tree, the lower story, the pineapples, and then the understory, your creepers and your ground covers on the ground there. This is to replicate and to use the principles that apply in nature to a polyculture orchard system so that we can get a really productive yield with as least energy as possible. So back to the principles that we talked about in the forest. This orchard produces no waste like the forest. So this tobacco tree, which is a common weed in this area, is used as a mulch. And so is this sweet potato ground cover is also used as a mulch. This plays the role that the leaf litter plays in the forest. We could all benefit from using this principle in our everyday life, in our work, in our office, in our home. It's not just for the garden. So if we try to reduce waste out of all these systems, I think the world will be a much better place. The second principle that we talked about was diversity, using and valuing diversity. If you have a look in this garden, you'll see the amount of diversity within it. We've got ginger, mangoes, tamarillos, pineapples, custard apple behind you, passion fruit on the fences, coffee beans, more pineapples, more tamarillos and yacon, just to name a few. So having this diversity in the garden means that you don't need pesticides or chemicals to reduce the amount of pests that you have in the garden, much like a natural ecosystem. Whereas in a monoculture system, if you have one pest or one disease that comes into your system, it can wipe out your whole crop. Therefore, this is much more resilient, like nature, and will provide all kinds of yields that go through all different seasons, and so you've never got a season where you're not getting anything out of the garden. The third and final principle we're going to talk about today is obtaining a yield, and this is the fun part. like we spoke about before, everybody needs to obtain a yield from the garden. You need to obtain a yield when you work. You need to obtain a yield with whatever you're doing, so you're getting energy for the energy that you're putting out. So let's go get a yield from the garden. As you can see, permaculture can be applied to our garden, to our orchards, and to our way of life. But it's not just about gardening. Those principles that we talked about, producing no waste, valuing diversity, and obtaining a yield, we can all apply this in every part of our life and our lifestyle. It's not just about gardening, it's also about the way we think and the way we view the world. Permaculture can be applied to architecture, the design of cities, the way we set out our home, and the way we function in our everyday life. So have a look into it and see if you like it, and see if you can apply some of the principles to your everyday life. It's a lot of fun.